Welcome to the Scott Hormann Podcast. I'm Scott Hormann, and after spending decades as a player, coach, and mentor, I've learned that the greatest lessons in baseball have very little to do with batting averages, earned run averages, or championships. They have everything to do with character, leadership, perseverance, faith, and becoming the kind of person other players want to follow. Each week, we'll have an honest conversation about baseball, high school sports in general, coaching, parenting, player development, recruiting, and the moments that shape young athletes long after the final out. Because at the end of the day, trophies collect dust, character lasts forever. Welcome to the Scott Hormann Podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Scott Hormann Podcast. Obviously, I'm Scott Hormann, and I'm here today with a good friend of mine that I've known for a long time in coaching in the state of Colorado at the college level at UNC, at Northern Colorado, then at Regis as the head coach, and now in his new gig at Colorado School of Mines. Welcome, Pat Jolley. Pat Jolley. And Pat, thanks for being on the show with us, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Scott. I appreciate that you reached out to us, and just excited to sit down and talk to you for a little bit.
Yeah, we've known each other a long time from your recruiting days at UNC, and then obviously at Regis. You had a couple really great years there as the head coach. When the job at Colorado School of Mines opened up, obviously it's an intriguing job, right? Like it really is. It's a beautiful Golden, Colorado, gorgeous setting, wonderful field, gorgeous field that's getting a huge upgrade right now. What made you decide to go, you know what, I think that might be a new challenge for me that I want to take on?
Well, I think challenge is the best word. I feel like, being in the other dugout, you always kind of saw Mines, and man, I was always intrigued by the type of student athlete that they were able to get here. I always thought that they were very talented, and I just thought, I thought from a facility and from a resource, standpoint, I just thought that Mines offered, just a unique challenge, and that's really how we look at it, and that's how we're going to attack it every day.
Yeah, they have to be a legitimate student athlete to go to Colorado School of Mines. Regis was pretty high too, so you've kind of had some experience there, but Colorado School of Mines a different player. It's a unique player that is looking for an engineering degree, correct? Most of them are engineering majors, I would say. Talk about that challenge of finding that right player to come into your new regime there and help that program build and become a powerhouse in the RMAC.
Well, at Mines, it's simply engineering, so I've had to take a crash course again and kind of get, used to reading transcripts. It's not something I've had to do in a little while, because you're looking for kids that have taken a pre-calculus, by their junior year, and are they taking, AP Calc as a senior, and is there a chemistry and is there a physics, course in there? And so we are looking for elite academic student athletes. When you're looking at Mines, you're talking about, a top 3 nationally ranked engineering program, and it's behind MIT and Stanford. So it's a couple of universities and institutions that's not too shabby to be in that same conversation with. So, for us, it's just going out and identifying those kids. And in some ways, I think in the identification process, it weeds itself out quickly. But I think because of the stature of the university here, we market ourselves to a very specific group of kids. And so we're just trying to match that with the institution, and then we're trying to match that with what we're trying to find in player identification. And then from there, we're just going to let this thing hopefully, get rolling.
Yeah. And what's unbelievable, and guys, I know most of you know Colorado School of Mines that are going to watch this, but when you graduate from Colorado School of Mines, man, you got a ticket written, in my opinion. I have a one of my former players that went there, and he graduated. And when he was done, he actually now owned a couple oil companies, and actually, he's doing really well for himself. So, I think that's really unique because, a lot of kids are looking at baseball first, and really the player you're recruiting has to be looking at that education first, 100% education first. I'm going there to get a degree in engineering and to set myself up and to set my future family up. And I think that's awesome because you can really identify those players, that you're looking for.
Yeah, 100%. I think when you talk about going to college, you hear people talk about the 40-year decision. And oftentimes, and I was guilty of this as well. You often look at it in the short term, the 4-year decision. But this is truthfully one of those places that this will impact not just you, but probably future generations of your own family. By getting a degree from Mines. One of the things that I've heard here so far is, the average graduate, on day one is walking into a job that pays, well over $80,000 a year. And by year 3, I think it's in the 140s, so you're talking about, just building that, you're just talking about building up your playbook and presenting opportunities to you as a student that is pretty unique and pretty rare.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, to be honest. And anybody who, in my opinion, is a D2 level baseball player, and you don't have aspirations, and you're not one of those 1%ers that have an opportunity to play professional baseball. If you're really thinking about your future and really thinking about not just the next 4 years or 5 years, your School of Mines is just such an unbelievable opportunity. Let's talk about Pat Jolley for a little bit. Talk about your ascent into head coaching. Like, in other words, how did baseball become your passion, and how did this become the dream that you're going to be a head college baseball coach and you're going to get, do all the things you need to do to make sure that you get that opportunity? And then talk about kind of what a culture of Pat Jolley baseball team looks like after you're done kind of giving yourself your props. I know people don't like to talk about themselves, but Pat, you've gotten to this level because you've been really good at coaching baseball. So how did you get here?
Well, I think first of all, where the passion comes from, it's just something that you've been doing since you were, 4 years old. And, I got done playing baseball, and all of a sudden I realized in that middle of July part going in, after my senior year, I had nothing to do. I wasn't used to this. I was used to, playing summer ball and getting prepared. And so I always knew I was going to coach. I always expected to coach at the high school level. That's where I got my degree in social studies education. And then all of a sudden I realized, man, I want to be around college, and just had some really good mentors through the years. I've been able to work under a lot of really good head coaches, whether they were former professional coaches or, when I was coaching in Louisiana, we started coaching, at a school that I played at, Centenary College, that was Division I, and then we transitioned to Division III. And so we had to learn a whole new system while we were there. And, then obviously got a chance to come out to Colorado, and, for the last 7-8 years, I've loved living here and really don't plan on moving. But I think it's just being surrounded by the right type of people and being willing to listen and learn. I have no pretense that I know what I'm doing. I just try to figure out what other people that are way more successful than me are. And, you always hear the cliche that everything's stolen in baseball. And
100%.
I feel like the only thing I've been really, really good at is stealing. And I've stole everything from anybody, that can give me, any piece of advice. And so, just having those things. And then when I was at UNC, I thought it was really cool. We were able to hire Jeff Bannister, who was our director of player development, who was the former American League manager of the year. And he was, even though those couple of years, I thought it was really huge just being able to use him as a resource. And, there were times where he got in me about, things I was doing. I'm sure there were plenty more things he wished he could have gotten into me about, but it was really good just having those resource boards. And then, I felt like going to Regis when I went to Regis and having a chance to work for Drew Lacombe, who just got the Air Force head job.
Yep.
I felt like there was a lot of similarities in a program that I would run that Drew was doing. And then, man, we just picked up the system and let it go, and so I just feel like having important people in your life that are willing to pour into you. But I also feel like you need to be in that go getter mindset, and you got to go find information wherever you can get it, and it doesn't matter where you can get it. There's, you might find that the best coach might be a little league coach. What do they do well, and how can you take that and just implement that into your program? In terms of the teams that I have been lucky to coach, I would hope that people would say that we are tough, that we play with everyday toughness, and that's both physical and mentally tough, and then that just we love to compete, and I think if those are a couple of things that are synonymous with our program, then I think that will put us in a good position. And then from there, it's just, can you get talented players, and you just let that ball roll, but for me, it's toughness, it's competitive, we want to compete. And then really it's just, do you love your teammates? And if you can love your teammates more than you love yourself, you start to allow some special things to really blossom. And that's the goal of every year.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I've talked to a couple other college coaches, and it really is like, it's a philosophy of almost every college coach that I've talked to is you better be a good teammate, right? Like, in high school, a lot of these kids, it's about them, they're on their high school team. They're the best player on their high school team. It's always been about them. And me playing college football, that was hard for me to learn, right? Like, it was hard for me to go, ooh, wait a second, I'm not the guy anymore. Like, I just got to find my niche in here and figure out how to help the team. And I think that's something that high school players really need to understand is, first and foremost, you got to be a great teammate when you get to college.
Well, you have to, because like you said, everybody was their best player. Everybody is their best, top two players on their travel team. And all of a sudden you start to put together those little all-star teams, back when I played, it was Legion all-star team. And all of a sudden you got used to not playing. And, now at the college level, you're going to have really good talent, and ultimately you just got to keep putting your head down, and going to work every day. But, the whole thing that this thing's about is, how can you, when this thing's over, people aren't going to really remember how many home runs you hit. They're going to remember if you were a good dude, and it's hard. And sometimes the hardest thing in life is sacrifice, and that's why, when you talk about being able to sacrifice your playing time or your wants or your desires for the betterment of somebody else, like, that is really hard. That is a tough thing. That's a new thing for a lot of kids.
Absolutely.
And, but those are the things that are going to get you remembered in 20 years from now. Those are going to be the really important things. And, as long as you can do that and you're well liked and your teammates love you, like, at the end of the day, it's about impacting other people. And you can have a huge impact by being a great teammate. And I do feel like if you are a really good person, like, good things happen to good people. So just, it's day in, day out, be a good person. And I promise you, at some point, the broken clock is still right twice a day. Like, all it takes is one opportunity. And if you've been prepared for it and you're a good person, I wholeheartedly believe your biggest hit is your next at bat. The most important, you're only, you're right there. Yeah. And it all starts with just being a good person.
Well, and it's awesome because that's what great teams are too. Like, it's hilarious because I played on some really good teams and I played on some really bad teams, right? You do that when you're growing up and you're in competitive sports. And I've coached some really good teams and I've coached some teams that were 6-13, right? Like, and where I found as a coach, those teams that have players that are selfless, that care about other people on the team and do things that help the team win first, those are the teams that really have success and go on and win championships. And when they have parents on the teams that are like that are selfless, that understand, hey, my kid's not maybe playing much, but this team's really good and it's good for him to be on this team. That's when I've seen some really great growth in teams. Let's talk offense for a second, because, man, you have coached some teams that have had some really good offense. I kind of remember a couple years ago at Regis, you guys could flat out rake. What is your offensive philosophy at the plate for at college baseball level, at the college baseball level?
I mean, I don't, and again, I don't think I do anything crazy. I don't think I'm anything special. this bleeds into the philosophy, but it also bleeds into the last part. And that's just, I really try I really try to take the ego out of it. I really don't think anything special, when it comes in terms of offense, we try to do things offensively here. And that's from a mindset standpoint. We want to be in an attack mode, but we really what I try to do is I want to take whatever a guy does well, and I just want to make that their strength, and yeah, we're going to try to build up their weaknesses, but everybody has different strengths. I think offensively, we're just going to try to take, what kind of offense that is given in that given year, and then we're going to try to do it. If we have a team that can really, power the baseball and slug at a high percentage, well, we're probably going to try to let guys slug, but if we have guys that can run, well, we're going to do that. At the end of the day, I feel like the best offenses create chaos in terms of the opposing teams, and a lot of times it's just ball decisions. What if you can force the defense at times to really decide what they are going to do, that is where you see, things start to unravel and really kind of give teams opportunities. But I think if we can be really good, with bat to ball skills, being able to have really good competitive two-strike at bats, and just run the bases aggressively and smart, man, the good teams take care of itself. I think, a lot of times coaches get too much credit for when their teams hit. Like, the easiest way to look like you're a good hitting coach is go recruit good hitters, so all the credit at the end of the day, my last at bat, sitting on almost, 20, 22 years ago now, I haven't swung a bat in forever. It's our guys that have the buy-in that are, able to take what we work on in practice. They're the ones doing it. I just look like I'm really smart. At the end of the day, we've had really good hitters, and you just try to put guys in a position to be successful. And at the end of the day, I feel like that's my number one responsibility.
Yeah, it's awesome what you said there. I always said that it's hilarious how much credit coaches get for wins and losses. Really, like, the players are the ones that win the games, and the players are the ones that lose the games. And but it's hilarious how because honestly, when you talk to other coaches out there, man, his teams really hit well. So, I love that you said, look, I just take who they are and let them be who they are, and maybe try to advance them a little bit. But literally, the best thing is to go find good hitters. So that's awesome.
Makes it simple.
And let's talk about this for a second, because you're at a school, an engineering school, a lot of smart kids, right? Like, the analytics in baseball have become crazy. This old guy, 58 years old, been coaching 25 to 30 years now, and analytics have really taken over the sport. What's your approach to the analytics side of baseball, and how did you have to maybe rearrange your thinking around the analytics? Because it is something that's important in baseball, and it's something that people look at.
Well, I think for myself personally, like, I feel like I'm in that half and half. Like, I didn't play in any analytic era, but I do feel like when you look at it, in the last, 12, 15 years, things have just exploded, and you talk about it, and, whether it's pitch shapes on pitchers, whether it's being able to measure, bat speed and exit velocity. I think all that information is good. I feel like in some times that becomes too much of the playbook. You got to go by what the numbers say. And I feel like coaching is still about, like, gut feel. Now, I understand percentages. I understand how that all works out and it translates, but I think you still have to have intuition, and you still have to have, the thing about analytics is it's hard to quantify. It's a people sport. If a guy's 0 for 20, I'm not sure if he's the best matchup, and the numbers could say that he is. And so I think you just got to make sure that you're using it to I think you got to go with your baseball sense and your baseball skill and use analytics, not the other way around. I'm not a guy who would ever use analytics first and then make decisions. I try to go with what my gut says, and then I try to see if the numbers match up. And but it's awesome when you have guys working at facilities and, or pitching coaches talking about, you know, what kind of movers they are. And they've got,
Spin rate.
it's just crazy. So
Yeah.
a lot of it's great. I think a lot of the information is helpful, but at the end of the day, I also feel like I was a guy who I know as a former player, I was a guy that if I was given too much information, I would do the paralysis by analysis. And so a lot of times I try to give, when we do give, whether it's some type of video or feedback or some type of analytic feedback, it's usually, we usually try to control the amount of information we're giving out just to make sure that guys have the freedom to go play. I think that's the catch-22 with this.
Yeah, and it really, to be honest, the kind of player you're recruiting, a lot of those guys are analytical guys. Like they're going to be looking at their analytics, and you're right. Paralysis by analysis is a huge thing with those types of players. I always said my best hitters were always the dumbest kids on the field because they just didn't think. They saw the ball and they hit it, right? And I always love that. You're not going to have any of those kind of guys running around School of Mines. They're going to be thinking, and they're going to be, that's part of it. And I think one of your jobs is going to be definitely to allow them to play with freedom and not worry about those analytics because they're going to worry about it on their own enough, probably. Let's say you're watching a high school player for the first time. What are the first 2 or 3 things you look at when you see a player? Like I call you and say, hey, I got a kid over here, come watch. And you've done that many times for me. And I've always appreciated you as a coach for that, always listening to me and coming and looking. Now, a lot of times you're like, nope, not good enough. But, which was great. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be. My job is to put guys in front of you guys, and your job is to take the ones you want. So what do you look like, or what do you look for those first 2 or 3 things in a player?
I think the first thing is do they have a passion for baseball? And sometimes that's hard to tell in a one game observation. But I think the one thing you learn is as you go, from the high school to the college level, like you better love the game. There's a lot of people who like baseball. There's a difference with the people who love baseball, right? The guys who love baseball are more willing to, to continue to put in the reps, when things aren't going in their favor. And those are the guys that tend, in the long run, to have those opportunities for being success. So one, you just try to find guys that really enjoy playing the game of baseball. Then there's other little qualities, right? Like, do their teammates like them? You can see right away whether or not that guy gravitates, does he make somebody else better, right? Does he hold somebody accountable, when they're doing just catch play? Very simple, very monotonous act of just getting prepared for a game. But, is there a high level of attention to detail? Right? Just little things like that kind of give you an idea, because when you start looking at the individual player, we're all looking for the same thing, right? We're all looking for things that I can't teach, right? I can't either you have power or you don't, right? And if you don't have power, that doesn't mean you can't be a great player, but that just might not be your identity. I can't teach you to run a 6'7" or a 6'6", And it used to be back in the day, you couldn't teach kids to throw 90, although I would argue that now.
Yeah.
So we're all looking for things that we can't teach, but from there, it's just a matter of, will they fit into your, do they fit into kind of what you like to try to do? Like I'm not a big swing and miss guy, even with some of the offenses that we've had, with some big, strong physical guys, is there some bat to ball skills? Is there ability to play, at a high level defensively? Do they run the bases well? Can they sling over a couple pitches for strikes? Do they compete? Those are all things. And then the one thing too that I look for a lot of times, baseball is baseball. You can hit 3 balls on a screws and you're 0 for 3, and that's just the way baseball works. And baseball sometimes is, the most unfair sport out there.
It really is.
But I really like to just follow when guys have failure. If a guy fails, I want to just see how you respond. Do you get upset and you throw your helmet? Do you get upset because the umpire, called a pitch a strike or called a pitch a ball and you disagree with? Like, dude, welcome to life.
Welcome to life.
You can do everything right, and there's no guarantee for success. And so a lot of times just seeing the guy, because you can, you're going to be able to tell, does a kid have bat speed? And if you trust the guys that are telling you, hey, I've got a guy, you're going to trust the track record. It's just the separators that at the end of the day, when you're playing, whether it's a 50 game Division II schedule or a 56 game Division I schedule, baseball players love to talk about the grind, and the grind really is, are you able to show up day after day, whether whether you show up the day after you go 4 for 4, those are the easy days to show back up, but what happens when you're 0 for your last 8? How can you still help put your team in a position to win a game?
Yeah, that's awesome, Coach. And you said something that kind of resonates with me, because I tell parents all the time, they don't care about your game changer stats. They don't care about your stats. And this game changer thing has been one of the best things that's ever come into baseball. But it was designed for parents to watch or grandparents to watch their kids, but it's turned into the holy grail of high school baseball. And you just said all the things you look for, but never once did you talk about actual stats. And
yeah. Well, I think the only stats that I look at, right? Because again, if you call me, Scott, and you say, hey, I've got a guy, and you go and you see, like, man, they're physical, they got bat speed, there's bat to ball, like all these things. The only couple of stats that I've ever really seen that really translates, when it goes for both pitching and hitting, is what's your strikeout to walk ratio. If you strike kids out in high school, that means there's some swing and miss. There's something in there. Usually the strikeout guys in high school tend to strike out guys in college, but the guys who walk, guys in high school tend to walk more guys at the college level. And the same thing goes for the offensive side. And so other than that, you're not the stats. You can't, we've all gone and seen teams play against really good competition. And we've seen teams play against, just subpar competition. And so, stats, they're kind of the fleeting starlight in the moment.
Yeah. And I love that that's the stat you look at, because as high school coaches, we should be teaching kids, hey, that's really what the most important stat there is. Quality at bats, putting the ball in play, hitting the ball hard, not striking out, getting on base for your team. Those are things that college coaches really look at. Not, I hit 450 against really subpar pitching for most of the year, right? Like that's really what I think is important. Let's go to the player. If a player's wanting to come to School of Mines, at what point do you start looking at him? I mean, recruiting's changed so much now, where it used to be your junior, you'd be looking at juniors. And I'm not sure that's really happening as much now, because NIL, transfer portal, all these things. Tell me about what a junior in high school should be doing right now if he's interested in coming to the Colorado School of Mines.
Well, the easiest part is making sure academically you align with that school. And I think by the time you get into your junior year, you should start to have a feel for what level you potentially play at. And obviously, the great thing about baseball is everybody matures in baseball at different ages. And so, but I think like by your junior year, you have an idea, like, the schools that are calling you usually tell you what type of level of player you are, right? So if you're only getting phone calls from Division II schools, that's not an offense, but that's just kind of the level that your play right now says that you're at. And so I think going back to your question, for us, as a junior, you need to academically make sure you're in alignment with what we're trying to get in here academically, or whatever school that you pick that you're trying to get into, period. And then from there, it's just, starting with contacting the coaches, and, and sometimes you got to be persistent with contacting coaches. Like there's literally thousands of you as high school student athletes, and there's only a coaching staff of 2 or 3 guys, usually at most programs, that handle the majority of the recruiting. And so, I think the big thing is academically, do you fit with what we're trying to do? And And then just from an athlete, from a contact standpoint, are you trying, like I said, persistent, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'd ask my wife more than once to go out,
Yeah.
before. And so, you just got to keep getting after it.
Mine took a little longer than that. Mine took. I was as persistent as can be about getting my wife to actually go out with me and hang with me, but she didn't want to hang with a baseball coach. I'm sure the thing you're building right now at School of Mines, and you just got there, and I know it's really early. But what's the vision? What's the vision at Colorado School of Mines? Because you have to have something in your brain that you go, 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, this is what I want it to look like here at Colorado School of Mines. What is that?
Well, I think, when people look at it, and obviously there's a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan, and, there's so many, but there's so many variables that come into play with any long-term plan. I look at it more like a business model or as an organizational model. And it's just, our mission statement is to try to create a championship identity in everything that we do, and that includes being on and off the field. Right. And it doesn't mean that we're going to go out and, we got some really, really, really good teams on the RMAC,
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're just trying to go out there and we're going to, a champion isn't necessarily seen just at practice, right? It's the things that they do, away from the field. It's when you see, I've heard this story from Coach Esky out at Stanford every year, and he always talks about the vision of a champion is the guy who's drenched in sweat because he's doing work, on a city park, and so, I don't want to get into, kind of get into corny, stories, but I think for us, it's just, we're going to try to create championship habits in everything that we do. And, and if we are able to recruit at a high level and get, some really talented ball players in here, and, we'll see where this thing goes, but I think if you can just start that and get kids to buy in on that, and, the bigger picture is about impacting others, and man, it's just, can you get good character kids? And I think if you get character and you create the culture, when you do play against some of these, elite Division II RMAC schools, it gives you a chance to be successful.
Yeah, I love that, because you're not putting any type of actual stamp on. You're just saying this is what we want to create. We want to create success on and off the field. We want good young men. And that's what a coach should be in life, in baseball, and everything. And so I appreciate that about you so much, Coach. I've appreciated the time we've had together, but I got some rapid fire questions for you, and they're all baseball related. So real quick hitters, just whatever comes to mind. Okay, let's play this game. Right. I've done it with a couple other coaches. Best baseball movie.
I'm gonna go for Love of the Game.
Great.
Help me out tremendously as a player.
I love it. Favorite major league ballpark?
Grew up in Los Angeles. I'm going to go Dodger Stadium. Ooh. I did go to the Rockies game last night. Got a buddy who's on the coaching staff, but I do love Coors Field.
All right. Best hitter you've ever coached?
Adam Paniagua.
Did you play pro ball?
Played pro ball, was the Division II National Player of the Year for us a couple years back at Regis.
Awesome. Best pitcher you've ever coached?
Probably Seth Lugo. Play pitches in the Royals rotation.
Okay. One coach you'd love to sit down with and talk baseball with for an hour?
That's a good one, but I feel like Augie Garrido would have been really cool to sit there and talk with and just kind of hear everything.
I sat with Tommy Lasorda one day at GCU, and
that's a good one.
It was amazing. It was amazing. Old school baseball or analytics?
Old school.
Love it. Metal bats or wood bats?
I mean, I go metal bat.
Okay. Day game or night game?
If you get a crowd there, night games are awesome.
Yeah, they're great. Best part of being a college baseball coach?
Getting to make an impact.
Awesome. All right, this is going to be a good one for you. If you weren't coaching baseball, what would Pat Jolley be doing?
That's a scary question. I'd probably be driving a truck, because I don't know You can ask my wife. I'm not good at anything besides trying to understand how to work with kids and hitters.
You are
run a program.
Hilarious because I've got a honey-do list sitting over there, and I'm like, half of the stuff I'm like, I don't know how to do that. You want me to do something I don't have any clue how to do. So, Coach, hey, congratulations again on getting the job, man. I've been a fan of yours for a very long time. I know you're going to make a huge impact there, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, Pat Jolley on the show with us this week. Check him out at Colorado School of Mines Baseball. And if you got a guy who wants to be an engineer, he's your man. Thanks for watching the Scott Hormann podcast.